Uh, well, thank you, everyone. Episode 10 here of Your Day with David. I have a special guest and friend on the show this morning, Andy Bukta. You guys probably remember episode 1 with Drew and Sadie. And Drew is actually Andy's son. And I think when Andy and I first met, too, I don't think either of us kind of had the expectations as to how our relationship would have developed over time. But Andy very much to me is a person I would consider kind of a mentor role in my life, and then some. Right? I think mentor is the business professional side of things, but then more personally a good friend. And
I agree with that.
yeah, and I think one thing I want to talk about. I'm not sure Andy, kind of the first time we met, but I do want to tell kind of a funny story, or maybe apologize. One thing that's I'll skip the Hayward story that time that we went there, but one story I do kind of hold as kind of a core memory. I remember it was move out day.
Must be the
Uh,
apartment.
it was it was move out day for Drew and I at the apartment that we had, and I remember that I had to go on a week long trip to do some research at the University of Arkansas. And I guess me being I don't even know how old I was at that time, maybe
You were
19.
in college. You weren't thinking about everything.
Yeah, and I didn't, I thought moving stuff would be easy, and I also just didn't. I basically move out day was the same weekend that I was gone, and everyone else is all packed up and ready to go, and then all my stuff is just as it is. And
Mhm.
pretty much you guys, Drew, I'm not sure who all else was with you, but packed
My
up
wife, my
all.
wife was there.
Okay. And Terry packed up all my stuff and moved it uh, to the next apartment over,
Yeah, we
essentially.
had to be out. You guys had to be out by noon or something, and you weren't in town. So
Yeah, and I didn't do any pre-packing. Um, so again, sorry. I probably apologized for that a
yeah,
number of times
I'd
before.
forgotten about it. But now that I think about it, that was actually kind of like, well, I guess we're moving his stuff to the new apartment.
Yeah, I want to ask, because at that point we had been well established as friends with Drew. I'd visited you guys in Illinois
Sure.
already
Yeah.
before, so I
Yeah.
wasn't just the random stranger roommate that your son
No, we
had.
knew you, right? We knew
Yeah,
you.
but
Yeah.
still, I am genuinely curious, and this whole podcast is half the time just grilling myself.
Okay.
What ran through your mind as you come into that apartment? And you're like, God, this freaking kid just left all his crap here, and we have to pack it up.
I don't know. Being candid, I think first of all, you weren't in town, and I remembered when I was in college that move out day was kind of a distant, on the calendar. It wasn't something I was looking forward to, and it certainly wasn't anything I wanted to prepare for. So I was kind of a day of move out guy throughout college, and that
Mhm.
would drive my parents nuts. So I guess to shed a little bit of comfort onto you, they'd show up to like, all right, it's time to go home today. And I mean, they literally would help me pack my room up. And
Yeah,
and it was because I had this like um deliberation, like, I'm just not going to be ahead of this one,
yeah,
and I might throw stuff in organized piles, but I certainly didn't know, like, okay, this is actually all going into a vehicle and going home. And so, yeah, they'd be in my room for like 2 hours, and my
yeah.
mom would just be grabbing stuff and just pop, pop, pop. And I'd be like, sorry about that, and I think so. I kind of related to it. Was I torqued? I think I was only torqued because it was just Drew and I and Terry. It would have been great if we had
Yeah,
extra people, just and it was simple stuff, David. You didn't
yeah,
have like this full house to move. It was like you had a
no,
room in an apartment, and it
yeah.
wasn't even it wasn't even that much stuff from the view of quantity. It was just, it is
I
what
don't
it is.
even know.
It's certainly not something I'm bothered by today. I just want you to
No,
know.
yeah, no. I
I
just hold it as
certainly,
a
I
thing. Like,
certainly, it didn't ruin my view of you. I just was like, I remember in college, I was terrible at moving out. I was
yeah,
so, if that makes you feel better, I hope it
No,
does.
it's just something I feel is like, man, that was just one day I really did Andy dirty. Is how
Yeah.
I hold that to
I
me.
did my parents dirty 4 times in a row, so I guess it was my penance.
And then you went to college at was it Drake? Is that or sorry,
Yeah, I was at Drake University most
Drake.
of my college. Yep.
And then so when they would pack you up, they would go back to Illinois. Is that
Yep.
right?
Back to
Or
Palatine, Illinois, born and
okay.
raised.
And
Yep.
then that's the other thing is yeah, it takes a long time to pack everything up, but then you drive home all the way and then you have to get it out of the car and all that crap too. So
Yeah,
it,
and it's
it's a long day.
6 hour trek. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
Um,
why my parents weren't happy about 2 hours of picking up and cleaning a room before driving home the day
yeah,
of. It didn't settle well.
sure. And so I'll kind of, I'm not sure. Actually, I can kind of remember, you know, we went from kind of this relationship where I'm just a roommate to your son to, I guess, over time, um, I think as I got farther along towards the end of my college career with a degree in finance, and I didn't know really anything of what I was
True.
looking to do,
Mhm. Mhm.
or um, what was out there.
Yeah.
And
Where do you start? Where do you start?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I just asked, right? Because I think you were the only person that I knew in the field that had
Finance,
any
yeah.
yeah, into any idea about finance. And I think that's kind of just what you have to do, right? At some point, you have to ask, right? I think a
Raise
lot
your
of people,
hand.
yeah,
Always raise your hand. Mhm.
a lot of people, or at least especially in my case, I had a problem with thinking I was the smartest guy in the room for a long, long time. And then college was a little bit of an eye opener to find out that you're not even the smartest guy on your floor in the dorm, right?
Mhm.
And and then when I got out of college, I didn't even have anywhere with all of what could be out there for me. And so
Mhm.
I think for anyone listening that sometimes they feel lost or don't have an idea as to where they kind of want their career to go, you got to find someone whose opinion you feel you put value in. And that's what Andy was for me, was saying, hey, what can I do? How do I get started? Where do I look? And is there anyone that that I can just talk to? Right. I think
Mhm.
that was one thing that happened was you were like, I can find time or introduce these people to you, but then it's kind of up to you to actually sell yourself and let them know the value that you bring. And so
Yeah. Let me cut you off there. I think you and I are friends because I can relate to you, and you're never gonna, as a young person coming out of college, which we all were at one time, it just takes one person, right? And what you may not know about me is I was David Sheets coming out of college.
sorry.
1992, there was a hiring freeze in the financial
Mm,
industry, and I had a father and 2 brothers in the business, and even my sister back then was in the industry in a human resources role, but she was actually working for a financial company.
mm,
And so I'd go back to Chicago. My wife's working. We're now renting an apartment. Well, she's renting an apartment, but I was like, we're going to get married, soon, and so it was one of those where you're transitioning into life, and I didn't have a job.
mm.
And so what David doesn't know about Andy is I had to go to Ulston Temporary Services and apply for a job by the week. And
I
I
didn't
had
know
to
that.
say, what can I do? So, funny story. One of my first jobs was they have to test you out, and they say, well, we're going to, will you just take any job? Because it's a weekly temporary, what companies in the area need it.
Mm,
So I'll give you what I did. One of the first ones I did is I was in the mail room at Mary Kay Cosmetics, where I literally was
wow.
opening mail for a week with these other people that are all out of work and not finding jobs. And I'm 22 years old, and I'm opening mail in the back room for all these orders for Mary Kay Cosmetics. And I'm like, life's going to get a little better than this, I hope.
Yeah.
I hope. So you question yourself. I'm a finance major, I'm a business major. what's out there for me. And literally, I was sending applications to banks, investment firms, insurance companies. I had actually had internships, basically summer jobs. And besides caddying, I was working downtown Chicago. Nobody was hiring.
Mm.
And it was just for a period of time. Just it was a recession and companies just weren't bringing kids out of college. So a lot of people out of work. And was I a 4.0 student? No, I was right around a B average student. So that didn't put me in anybody's radar like a special situation. So I went from Mary Kay Cosmetics to driving a truck for Motorola.
Mm.
So I had to drive a truck for Motorola. They were testing cell towers. This is before the iPhone. This is like the flip phone, and Motorola was like the
The
giant,
company. Yeah.
the company. So I was just happy to tell people. And so this is just little humble pie to tell you, you go, I'm coming out of college. I'm in
Yeah.
summer. I don't have a real job. What do you do? Run into your friends. You're like, hey, what are you doing? Working for Motorola, driving a truck.
Yeah.
And of course, they're not treating me very well because I'm
Yeah.
only there for like a week. So they're like, just do what I say. Don't talk. We're testing equipment here. So I'm up front.
Nice.
If I tell you to stop, stop. I mean,
Mm.
literally, they were not being very friendly. So that's my second temporary job, David. So finance major's paying off. So
Mm.
so now I get a job, and I take a job for 3 days in an accounting department of Motorola. And the
Mm.
good news was, being a people person and being someone that I never quit. The one good thing about you and I is that you were exploring. Okay, so you still were paying attention to. I have to do something. You had an awareness. I have to do something. I can't just sit on my tail and wait for the world to come to me. I have to take initiative. So the good news is, during that 3 days, I networked within that accounting department, and I spent time. Someone passed me by, I said hello to them. I was always formal, I was polite, I was respectful, but I didn't just walk by them with my head down, because I'm just processing people's expense accounts. I'm literally data entry. Oh, the
Mm.
other job I had before that, sorry, there was one more. All the phones that were shipped in that were broken, this is in
Uh-huh.
between. This is my third job. All the phones are coming in. Any Motorola device that was broken, I had to enter in the serial number, what the problem with the phone was. I had to manually enter it in the system and
Mm.
then put it in a bin, and the bins got taken to the repair center. I did that. That was my third job. So the finance major, really,
Yeah.
cosmetics, driving a truck, and now data entry for broken phones.
So it was
Um,
important how you carried yourself in those 3 days at the accounting temp
that's what
job.
led me to actually locking in about a 4-month period of being in the finance department, because the gal
Mm.
sat there and said, "You'll find a job." He goes, "Why don't we need some people in the finance department and do a little more of the payroll type stuff." And it was a specific area, but she signed me up to like a 4 month, like, we need someone here for 4 to 6 months. Can you commit to that? I did. So that was like my Terry's like, good, you got work for the summer, you got work.
Yeah.
So I know this is a long-winded thing, but I'm trying to paint a picture of you
Is
coming
that
out and reaching out to me, that you weren't the only one to have that struggle where you thought you were going to graduate and the world was going to say, Andy, come work for us. Nobody was knocking on my door, and I had to go figure things out and adapt.
yeah.
And, and I think that's a survival instinct that people have that they sometimes underestimate. And so let's flip it back to you. When we started talking, one of the first things I did with you, because I knew who you were, and I knew I moved your stuff out of your apartment, and so I was like, here's a go-getter. And so I said, David, let's not focus on the job. I said it, I'm paraphrasing. You're picturing
Mhm.
what job you should do, and I'm like, who are you? Like, what do you like to do? I'm a people person. I'm a social person. I care about people, and I really want to advise people. And I remember you saying, I kind of want to be someone that they come to for advice. I just feel that that's something I want to do. I want to do what you do. I kind of feel like that's a job for me. And you want to connect with people. And so I'm paraphrasing, but we talked about, instead of you focusing on the jobs out there, I had you start to focus on who you were. what are you, who are you, what do you know about yourself, and what job calls for someone like you, that it doesn't matter what your resume says, you're probably going to outwork 80% of your competition because you're passionate about it. If you remember those calls we had, where's your passion? And I think I told you during that call, every one of my kids, and I hope they all attest to this, I said, just do what you're passionate about, because otherwise you're going to have a job that you can't wait to switch to the next job. You've got to find something that you're passionate about. And if that's it, run the hell in that direction and don't look back, because you can always outwork somebody. You can always out want somebody. And don't go half-ass, go full ass, and we talked about that. And I remember we had some calls in the car rides when I was coming to see Drew and stuff. And what I loved about you, David, is people like you do well as soon as you figure out people trust you, that you're candid with people, you treat them like it's the last time you'll ever see them, meaning you'll be honest with them. That's a rare trait, when someone is willing to be honest and vulnerable, and but direct and purposeful, and that's what you bring to the table. And it's all about having the confidence that that is who you are, and your job is going to be built around that. And that's where you know where you belong. Okay.
Well, one
And
thing,
so that's that. I'm flashing back to our conversations and I'm trying to bring
yeah,
it back. I know I
yeah,
get into storybook telling, but I hope you appreciate that I related to you
yeah,
in the long-winded version. I connected with you, which is why I was willing to spend the time, saying I could help him.
yeah. And you
I
certainly
shut up
have.
now. That was a long segment.
No, when you go into story book mode, it makes this a lot easier for me, because I could listen to myself talk all day. But one thing that I appreciated about you, I think a lot of people have a tough time when they're growing up and even well into their careers, with kind of like self-reflection. I remember, I was kind of networking into this ultra net worth type of space, trying to, because what I was doing, I was like, well, there's got to be a next step, right? And
Mhm.
I always thought, well, these people are so much smarter than me. They're so much more experienced. I don't bring anything to the table. Basically, what I'm saying is, I think people struggle a lot with, self-reflection. What do I actually bring to the table? And so what I appreciated about you, Andy, and I think that probably something you maybe more have a gift for than just, it's based on something you did, is you can see the qualities in a person as to why they do have value. So that was something I asked multiple times, like, hey, like, I'm a young guy, I don't have as much experience as I'd like, but I'm doing what I can at work and I'm busting my ass. you know what else do I have, right? Because self-reflection, even to this day, is something I don't do well at. I'm getting better at it, but more common nowadays, my self-reflection is more things like I just focus on what are my core values, and then how do I find joy in that and continue that with my current career. So I want to thank you, for just taking. I mean, by the way, Andy says he would we would have phone calls on his drive back and forth from Ames to the Chicago area where he's at. That's the only time you can find Andy. That's the only free time he has, is when he's in the car. I swear. Um, so I very much appreciate the fact that when he would have that time, he would spend it with me. But it does bring up kind of a good point in, um, or maybe I could ask too, how young were you again when you met Teri?
I met her senior year of college.
Junior college.
It was like August of '91. So
Excellent.
that was my senior year. She was graduating, and she became friends with people in the house I was living in.
Mm,
And I knew I was going to marry her about a month in. So
yeah.
in fact, I told her that. So which was probably scary for her in college.
She had a
Um,
lot of faith in the mailman at Mary Kay, huh?
no, that's scary. She was the only one with a real job technically for the first year of our marriage, until really most of the first year. So that was, that tested a relationship right off the bat. Because
I have
I
a
didn't really find out what I was going to do until the end of that year, when I finally got hired
mm,
at a company downtown, and I actually got started in my real career. So
I have a soft spot for, romance, or kind of like origin stories.
Okay.
Could you tell me, or and the people listening a little bit, how did you meet Terry? And because I like the story, and then how did you guys eventually go on to be what you are now?
Well, I think I enjoy telling the story because I think in this situation she didn't know I was looking at her because she was friends with people in the house, and
Hmm.
I'm not a very aggressive person as far as new people. Like I was social, but I wasn't the person that just like put myself in front of every person that walks in the door, or just, was their best friend. I kind of was more of an observer, and just you just pay attention, and yeah, she caught my eye like pretty quickly, but she was already friends with other guys in the house. So I'm like, I wasn't gonna, I'm not one of those people that imposes, but she was hanging out a bit, and I think one of the first nights that we really spent the time is I figured out she wasn't really serious with anybody, and she
Mm.
wasn't somebody that dated a lot of people. So it's like we just became friends first. I always say that we became friends first. And the best story is that I ran into her one night where I was on a blind date
Yeah.
with a person at a bar who, and I won't name, I'm certainly not going to name names, but I don't even know if she talked. It was
Mm.
just one of those bad hookups where someone's like, you'll really like her and all that stuff, and I couldn't even get a conversation going. I'm like, this is really off and awkward. And Terry was at the bar, so I end up going to the bar to maybe refill a drink or something, and I end up just hanging out talking to her at the bar. And I kind of look over my shoulder, and the person I was blind dating with was already talking to two other people, guys. And I'm like, I don't think she's gonna miss me if I don't go back. So I didn't go back. I hung out with
Mm.
Terry, and honestly, Terry and I ended up going back to our house, hanging out with the guys there. And she and I ended up sitting on the back fire escape talking until about 3 in the morning, just talking about stuff like two people that had like reconnected. We didn't know each other, but we knew each other very, like, we just were so vulnerable, but talking, very positive conversation. And all of a sudden it's like, my God, it's 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And so, call it a night. And I remember she stopped by the house the next day. And I think part of her was like, all right, is he, was that just kind of like fun for him, to talk and
Yeah.
everything? And like she knocked on the door, and back to the house. And I'm just kind of watching TV. And I'm like, come on over here, come on, grab a seat. So I think
Yeah.
she was like, oh, wow, maybe this guy likes me.
Yeah.
And so I took her for my first date. I had to go get my car tuned up at Sears Auto Center. I'm like, I got to take my car, and you want to come with me? I got,
Sears.
maybe, I got to drop my car off. We can grab something to eat. She's like, all right, first date at an auto center. you know, but it was a date. So I think it was just because I liked her, and I just, it was an immediate attraction thing for me where I'm kind of done looking. I was very,
Yeah.
very kind of hooked on that one. I was like, I just really like this girl.
Yeah.
And we just were dating right from there. And a month in, I remember, if you want the full story, because we dated a few times for the first month, and we just saw each other a lot and really loved being around each other. And we went to Jimmy's American Cafe in West Des Moines, and there was a white tablecloth on the table where they have like markers and crayons and stuff to draw. So I remember writing down the acronym, and I wrote it down and tore off a piece of paper. I'm like, ask me about this someday. It just had words on it. But what it was is I said, Terry and Andy, I love her, someday man and wife. And I did the acronym for it. And I just tore it off. I said, just ask me about this someday. And I think, I don't know, it was within that
Mm.
first year she asked me about it, but maybe it was
Yeah.
Christmas that year. But that's the Terry Andy story. Was from, we just became friends first and just had a genuine interest and trust with each other. And it was great that we were friends first. So
Well,
I'm sure I left off some stuff she would add,
we can
but
get her opinion maybe at another time.
good luck. Good luck.
Yeah. Um, and you know, how do I want to say this? Um, so in the line of work that you and I do, there's a lot of
Yeah.
different ways to do it.
Yeah.
But when you have, in your case, Terry, and then you married her down the line, then you have kids,
Hmm.
then you have work, and in our line of work sometimes can
Yeah.
pretty much take your whole
Very
day.
demanding. Yeah.
Then you have you have
A lot of hours.
pets, you've got, and then you have just taking care of your general health and all. Basically, what I'm alluding to is balance, right?
Right.
Um, and how do we, is it just prioritizing things, or is it at the end of the day, we need to get a paycheck? How have you found the best way to juggle your time, but then, make sure that you're still spending it with the people that want your time as well?
Well, back in the 90s and early 2000s, you're right. There was a lot going on. I certainly kept my plate fuller than Teri would have wanted because I had a lot of nervous energy. I had a lot of things going on at that time. I had a mom that passed away. I had a new job where I jumped into work with my father, literally because he was spending time with her at the hospital every day. And I was a financial planner. And the interesting story there is the balance wasn't there initially because I was jumping into a big ocean of, am I even going to be good at this? And I remember telling when my dad said, I was at a small little company working for them, and right around that time, I had heard the news that my mom had a chronic, terminal condition, and it was not going to go away. And um, I got my license to be a planner, and so I said, I don't really want to do what you do. And he looked at me, he goes, "What do you mean? You don't want to do what I do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a planning firm. You're at a a firm that just does you sell stuff, right?" I just had a
Mm,
very naive view, and he's like, "You don't know anything about what I do. Why don't you come over and meet with my meet come to the office? I'll show you a little bit more of what we do. Meet some of the people I work with." And it was really an aha moment that I underestimated what my father's business was, that I'm like, wow, I do fit into this. But it was very scary. And I had to basically work with him to service his clients that didn't know me. And I was like, they're not going to like me. They like dad. I'm this young guy. What do I know? Right. But I always knew that I could outwork somebody. I knew that the best thing, no different than the advice I gave you don't have to have all the answers. It's the fact that you will go get the answers and go get the right answers. And you will know what you know and know what you don't know, but you will be relentless on the pursuit of fact finding, on talking to experts, and don't always try to feel like you have to be the expert. Be the expert in knowing where to get information. Be the expert in knowing how to provide service and follow up in a very effective, timely manner, and be genuine. Be honest. This isn't looking good. This isn't the route we need to go. But I did all my fact check. I did all my here's what I did in the process to get to this follow up. So with my dad, I had to do a lot of things on the fly with people that didn't know me from Adam, and I was just Bill's son. So that first 5 years, I was not balanced. And so where am I going with this? I am answering your question. I've always been a student. I've always been a student. I continue to
mm,
be a student. Every year I'm thinking about what can I do better? What can I learn more? I passionate about learning and being coached. And I knew I didn't have time management. I knew I didn't have, and I had a godsend of a wife who continues to be the rock and foundation of our household. She's the head of household for sure. Certainly my kids would tell you that, and I have no problem saying that. And it's just who she is. But I had to figure myself out to be organized enough so that I didn't over frustrate her during I kind of was disorganized. I'm trying to do everything while also being active with friends and stuff like that. So it wasn't, I had to go take courses. I had to go, what is time management? And I literally signed up for a local course where it was like 10 weeks where somebody was presenting on organization and time management and how do you look at your week? How do you look at your month? So how do you balance it all is you raise your hand and you say, I don't know how to do this for myself. I'm assuming there's an expert that helps people. Where can I go from work mode to personal mode? Work David and personal David and friend David and relationships, boyfriend David, whatever. How do I stay connected with where I'm at that moment? And honestly, my answer to you is, if you don't know the answer, educate yourself on how people do it. And you're not going to be perfect, but at least you're gathering information on how do I shut certain things off so I'm not in work mode all the time, which is hard to do.
mhm.
Um, So in our business, it's real easy to be good, but it's very difficult to be great. It's very easy to be average.
Mm,
A lot of people out there in our business are average, and it's not that they're bad people. It's the fact that they clock in, clock out, and they don't take the extra step to educate and continue to push themselves to be better than most. And I think that's where that conversation goes, is that started with time management. Or how can I be the most effective between 7 a.m. and 3 or 4 p.m. because I had kid responsibilities, and in the mornings I was working out at 4 or 5 in the morning. I had a lot of things I was balancing. Started with getting educated and say, how do I organize this so I'm not, and how do I be present on the home front? And I wasn't always present on the home front because I wasn't organized, and I was kind of, my
mm.
hair was on fire, you know. So that
Yeah.
was the early days of Andy. Is just I was figuring it out, David, and I think that a good way to explain to you, I didn't have it figured out. It took time, and it took education, it took coaching, and that has paid off for me today. But it was a 20-year stretch of believing that I could be better in certain areas, and I focused on certain areas that I wanted to improve it. And I didn't do it all at once. I took off pieces, and I said this and then this and this. I always was looking at a certain area that I said I could really do better here.
It's funny though, because in our
I
line of
hope that
work,
helped what you're saying, what you were asking me.
yeah, no, it did. But, we kind of have it's a little bit of a curse where, like you said, what separates the great from the good is when you're great at something in our line of work, you get busier and busier and
Mhm.
busier. And then it's kind of an exponential growth over time where because you were great, it doesn't let up, right?
Yeah. It's not
And
9 to 5. Yeah.
no, and so well, it's funny because in my case, my version of what I do compared to you, working for corporate, it is a 9 to 5. Well, mine's more
Well,
like 7 to 5. But um, outside of it, you know, how do you view or when do you see yourself ever slowing down, right? Because as far as I know, you're just even more busier than you've ever been, right? Which means you have to get even better as time goes on at time management and really just better at the trade. But have you ever thought about slowing down or how do you fight off those thoughts of just like quitting, I guess?
I think it's a very good question. Like it starts with a lot of conversations with my wife and family where we just talk about stuff because they see when I go through my real busy stretches versus when I seem a little bit more
Yeah.
balanced. Sometimes I just feel like I'm sad, but that is the nature of most people that are either entrepreneurial or running a business, with partners, and we all have responsibilities, but I tend to own my situation to the nth degree where I have a very high sense of responsibility to people that are paying me to work for
Mm,
them. And so I kind of have that adage where I just, I want them to sleep at night, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to sleep at night, you know, because I'm thinking about it a lot. So I think my open communication with my wife about it, we're starting to spend a lot more time recently where we sit around, we talk about stuff, and we're honest about it. And I'm certainly still making mistakes on that, but I'm slowing down by putting myself in a different environment where there's not a whole lot going on around me.
mm,
And I'm separating myself at first by just, like you said, being out in Galena,
mhm,
which is not the purpose of this. But the point is, that's one of my first steps towards creating a space for myself where I'm not in the middle of work, and I'm not in the middle of what I feel like I'm right up the street from my office. And I need to feel like when I get off of a phone call or something, there's nothing else pulling at me, right?
mhm.
I say yes to a lot of things, and besides work, I've got community stuff that I involve with, and I'm actually not as active as I used to be. And part of it is just I don't have that ability to allocate that kind of time, but I'm still helping in a different way. I'm supporting in a different way. So the answer is that the first thing is to talk to the people, your loved ones around you, and say, I'm struggling with this, and how do I shut off 24/7 mental me? And I think it helps when they tell you, well, here's a few things. Why don't we spend time doing X, where you can't think about work? You go for walks, or you know drive back and forth to town, and
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm working on. I'm a work in progress there because I tend to think about work a lot.
Mm,
So it's a very challenging question. As you can tell, I'm not answering it very direct because I don't know if I quite have that one figured out, but I'm working on it because I'm talking to people around me saying I need help with this so that I can truly shut off.
yeah.
Um, but I
Well, I
don't know if
think,
that's an easy thing to do when you have a successful, great business, great team around you that you're working with. It's really
yeah.
hard to shut it off. It's really hard.
Well, that's, I guess earlier you mentioned kind of when you were younger, you had a slice of humble pie. I guess for me, and for people listening, it's still humbling for us that, hey, even someone that's been doing this for 30 plus years now at this point,
Yeah, technically
do we want to,
90, yeah, 92, but I'd say 1998 when I joined my father is when I was a I was a planner before 1998, but 98
yeah,
is when I became where I had actual clients that are,
okay.
that I became their person, their advisor.
Yeah. So over 2 decades of someone who, and I think anyone stretch of the imagination would consider successful in what they do, they're still learning to, or still trying to navigate that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope that if there's people that, are struggling, they feel like, man, I've been doing this for so long, we're not seeing, I'm not seeing the results, or I'm still like in this mindset, or whatnot. I mean, like you said, you're going to be a student until the day you die.
Well,
Right.
and be a student about balancing your life and be a student about time for yourself and your family and be a student about where you can tell you're struggling. Be a student, let someone coach you.
Yeah.
Listen to audible books that are, because if that's what works for you, if you have a 5 hour trip, you can listen to music or you can actually listen to something that you connect with and someone telling you how people figure it out. I'm a big believer in sometimes you just let someone else tell you, here's some tips, here's some things, to find some
Yeah.
balance. I do that. I'm the kind of person that does do that. I do read on a plane. I do, you know, I'm always trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Now, I guess, were you always, because again, like you said, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and the fact that I was a people person, I enjoy helping people.
Mhm.
Um, personally, I'm also pretty introverted, so I have a social battery that will die out around 10:30. But
Okay.
um, you know, were you always the type of person that also, you know, was a people person, was willing to, give advice, or help others, or did that kind of come along
No,
the way?
no, I think one thing I knew how to do, and it was years of honestly being a caddy, carrying a big golf bag for people that had been successful in their own right, that are part of a private club, that are willing to pay a kid to carry a bag. And that was my first dose of service because you do a bad job, you learned about it, you heard about it, you got no pay or no tip, or you got a bad report card, and then you get demoted. I mean, you had your first dealings with what is a boss like. And I think early on, late 90s, my father had a big influence on me, and my former partner, also had a huge influence on me because he was very honest with me. He's like, people are looking at you like a young punk, and you have to accept that, and you have to understand that one thing you can do is you can allocate your time, you can allocate your work ethic, but I did not feel comfortable. You talk about being introverted after 10 o'clock. I'm my adaptive work style. I'm social when I'm comfortable within my, like, the room of people I'm in or the conferences I go to where I have familiar faces. But man, I am not automatic. And I definitely did not believe in myself in the late 90s. I think the only thing that called me to it was my father needed help. I was in a similar background as far as planning and understanding investing and on a personal level, families and stuff. And he was in that business. So I connected with that and I kind of had to be on his wing because he was already doing it. And I was not going to be building a business. I was not going to cold call. When I did, it was just to contact people to say, hey, would you come to the seminar, we're putting on, or, I did not, I was terrible. I was never going to be a salesman. What I was going to be as a servicer. And I told Dad, the best thing you can do with me is have me at the office when people call and they need things, or if they have to research something to follow up or look at their accounts. I will go all in on that, but I am not going to call someone up the street. If you ask me to, it's not going to be something I want to do, because I felt like I was invading their space and their privacy, and I never really got over that part. So
Mhm.
I'm answering your question in a way that I was very awkward, socially awkward when it came to strangers,
Mhm.
and suddenly trying to impose myself on them, like, hey, work with me. My best way to work with people was work with people that already trusted someone within a team, and I now was a team member,
Mhm.
and I owned that, and I ran like heck in that direction. I am passionate about servicing people. I'm passionate about advising people that already are saying, you're part of this group. Now, I'm talking about me in 1998, 2000.
Yeah.
You know, now I love meeting new people because I have 20 some 30 years, of experience. I'm very comfortable with my expertise and my education. So when new people come in the office one on one, I'm passionate about that. I love putting the pieces together. Like, what are we going to build here? What are we going to do? But no, not 1998 me. I was scared to death. Like, I am going to be terrible at building new business because I don't really feel comfortable at all. So I thought I was going to fail. So back on to you, David. I still relate to you from the view that the people that know you trust you. The people that you've serviced, they like talking to David. They enjoy talking to David, and David is going to be someone that they get on the phone. They're not like, oh God, I have to talk to David. They're actually looking forward to it by and large, and that's the part that I owned, was I want them to have a pleasant experience and that I'm going to work my ass off for them.
Yeah.
No, I was not. No, I was not confident that I was going to make it. I was not. I can tell you right now, it took a lot of honesty from the two senior guys that I worked with, who were two very different people. I had to really absorb and be a student to them. And I went to lunches with the veterans in our business instead of going to lunches with my friends that just shoot the breeze on the latest sports games. I was literally sitting at lunches with people 20 years my senior that knew what they were doing and understood our job and our role. And I just sat there like a fly on the wall. Like I said, I just mentally, I always was like, what can I learn from these guys? How can I be better at this job? Because if you put me out on my own and said, go sink or swim on your own, I'm such a team oriented person. I am not an individual person that could just do it all myself. I just had to be around other people, and I learned a lot. So
Mm.
I learned a lot about myself, and I made it, but it was not an easy ride because I did not have confidence until much later on in my career, as far as whether I was going to really make it. Right.
Yeah.
Does that help? Does
Was
that answer your
Yeah.
question?
Was there I have kind of like two follow-up questions, but I guess was there the first one is what was that kind of moment, if you had one, where you're like, okay, I can do this. I can make it
Oh eight,
here.
oh nine. Oh
Uh,
eight, oh nine.
yeah.
The
I
financial
think that
crisis. The
that
financial
tested a lot
crisis.
of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I won't go into too much detail, but I will say there was some really tough times going on for a lot of people, including one of the persons that I ended up working with, who within the team needed help and needed an extra person to jump in. And I was already working with my dad, and luckily I had built a relationship, and I had been through 9/11 when it rocked our financial world and it rocked client psyche, and the confidence goes right out the window with people that were, our clients. It's a very scary time when you just have complete uncertainty. The one constant in the financial world is there's always uncertainty. What's different is our perception of the
Mm.
events that we're reading about or hearing about. And I'm quoting Christopher Davis is a guy that actually quoted that. So I'm not stealing, I don't want to plagiarize it, but it's a brilliant comment. I learned that. But in 08, 09, that's when I really realized the difference between uncertainty is always here, but the perception of the event. How do you handle it? How do you handle all this noise? Like, what is going to happen here during this 18-month stretch where every day you're learning new things about an industry that was just on the brink of, I mean, it was a scary time. That was my aha moment, was going through that market, didn't run away from it, ran towards it, spent a lot of time in a lot of meetings, knew what I was good at, be honest with people, be on the phone with people, constantly on educating myself of the events. How do we view this? How do we navigate this water? This water is really something. And that was my aha moment that I knew where I belonged. I would say 01, 02, 2000, 2002, but honestly, I was still pretty new in the business, and my father really took control of how do we navigate through those times, because he was a veteran and he'd been through the 70s, he'd been through the 87 crash, he'd been through the 92, 94. I mean, he's been through tough times, and he's what helped. I'm not going to take credit. I needed to be partnered with him to really understand where to, how do you get through that? And we did get through it, because he was extremely well read, and he was always a student of the market and the games. And that I learned that from him. And then 08, 09 was kind of my turn. We were still working together, but man, I was much more in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I think back at that time, it's one of my proudest moments to make it through, but it also was one of my hardest stretches of what's going to happen in our industry. What's going to happen to people after this is over. And we made it through, and I constantly educated myself on how do I interpret and perceive the events in front of me, and how do I advise people to get through this. And we did. And we had a game plan. Always have a game plan. We need a game plan. What is our game plan? Bring them into the meeting. Follow your game plan. Your playbook's going to work, but it doesn't feel like it's going to work all the time. Drive to New York to LA. There's going to be times where there's an interstate clearing accident. You got to go off and take a 2-hour detour and then work your way back on. And you're miserable until you hit the interstate again and you start flying again. Euphoria. But that 2-hour stretch was 2 days. It was just the worst.
Yeah.
That's what bad markets do to people. It's those log jams that you're like, oh my God, I didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah, I think,
that was my proving ground. I think 08, 09 was really where I knew I was in the right spot. I knew I was where I wanted to be, and I owned it.
Yeah, so it's funny because that means it took you a decade in that industry to say, okay, like I can make it here. Right. And I think a lot of people would quit before a decade and say, this isn't right for me or whatnot. But in your case, you're kind of a testament of almost patience, right? Patience with it all. That, I think people, especially nowadays with our social media culture, everyone says, you got to be patient, you got to trust the process. But a lot of people underestimate
I learned to do that during that time. I learned to do that. You trust the process, trust the history of events like this. The sky will clear, the clouds will clear, the sun will come out.
There's a lot of that even nowadays in recent events, from the conversations that I'm having with people. And I'm 26.
My blind rescue dog, George. He's George. Joined our Zoom meeting. Don't let you distract your comment, but
he's zooming.
For the viewers out there, this is normal for him. He's got excitement and anxiety, and so he's probably going to circle for a little bit.
And that I think that's a healthy tangent. Let's talk about George for a second. Why, right? Why did you decide in the middle of all the busyness with work and family, getting this new place in Galena, and then you say, okay, let's also get a new dog that's a blind rescue, and it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, I would say George has been a blessing to us from the view that we've always loved pets, obviously, and there's a lot of pet owners in the world, and certainly I grew up with dogs, and Teri and I we had our first labs. Probably around that 08, 09.
Yeah.
Maybe that's right around when we got them, close to it. And it was a new experience. But it connects with me because I've always dogs are kind of my comfort zone. It's like, it's my happy place. They're just so 100% love most of the time. It sounds like an ironic statement, but they just rely on you as the owner to, be happy or not. Right. And Teri was watching posts of George. Unfortunately, we had lost a couple of the labs we lost within a year of each other. They were older, but they also, one got sick and one passed suddenly, and it was very devastating to us. And I think we were looking to fill a void. And Teri was watching this posting of a foster family that there's a person that places rescue dogs with families, and the foster family takes it in, kind of settles it down because they're usually not in great shape.
Mm.
kind of calms them down so that they're suitable for a home. And Terry was watching posts of this dog, George the blind rescue dog, which is a bit of a famous local dog in the publications on the new, the streaming newsletters, right? Or whatever you
Mhm.
call it. And so we go over and visit George because she's like, I think I want to adopt this. This will be a whole new chapter for us. And being an empty nester, our 4 kids are independent for the
Mhm.
most part, but no one's really home anymore. So we were like, that could be a really cool thing for us to share and do together. And she
Mhm.
really wanted to do that.
Mhm.
And the house is no longer quiet, let me tell you.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
So
did
that's where George spawned. Was I think it was a hole we wanted to fill, and it was a new chapter we wanted to try out. And honestly, I'm getting just as much joy out of him that
yeah.
any other dog I've had. He's just 100%. Just I don't even know how to explain. He's like a lab that can't see. He
Oh,
just loves it where he's at. So,
yeah.
and we love him back. He's pretty awesome. He's trapped in my room right now, so I'm gonna take 2 seconds and let him out.
That's fine.
Because right now he's kind of nervous, like, why can't I get out of the room? That's the George segue. But
Mhm.
I will backtrack. You were talking about how today is similar to 0809. There's a lot of challenges and psychological things. My view is it's, this time is different is always the most dangerous thing people can say in an event where you get this unexpected thing that
Mhm.
affects, you know, it's not always, it's a different cause, but it
Mhm.
tends to have, history tends to repeat itself. So
Mhm.
so yeah, I think most of us, including yourself and myself and all the people out there that are watching the world today, it's always unnerving because it's a new set of circumstances, and that's why perception is how we perceive the events and how serious those events are. But in the grand scheme of things, 2/3 of the financial markets are, yeah, maybe my number's a little off, but it's not far off. It's people managing money for other people. you know, Very large pools of money that are being managed by people paid to do it. They tend to separate humanity from their job.
Mhm.
And so these kind of times, these kinds of stressful situations, they tend to shut the emotions off. And yes, it's uncertain and it's terrible and it's unnerving and it's scary, but the markets still every day open up, and it's who wants to buy, sell, right? It's just supply and demand. And so the market doesn't really care.
Yeah.
And it's this terrible thing to say, but the market's very unemotional. It may seem emotional, but it's really not. It's just buyers and sellers on a given day
Yeah.
reacting to what they think is going to happen. So you have to separate the two. Um,
Now, so the reason why I had brought that up is because me at 26 now. Oh, and I'm not sure if you were aware, but when I turned 27, I stole a weekend uh, to be at your place in Galena.
oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure if you knew that July 8th
I know
weekend,
it now. That's great.
and you're more
Am
than
I
welcome to.
invited?
I was gonna say you're more than welcome to join because we're thinking, and I'll have to ask you maybe more details about it all later. But I think we're able to potentially rent out a boat there on Lake Galena, and we might need
Yeah.
a boat driver. so, but we'll see. I mean, I'm not. Anyway, that a
I
little
never thought
tangent
of
there.
starting a charter service, but I might have to see
Hey,
what the legal
it's not a bad gig,
compliance
Andy, because
requirements are for me to charter for a weekend.
we'll bring beer and good company, and it's not the first time that you
Yeah.
spent a weekend with us, so you know what you're getting into. And
Well, if I'm the
um,
designated driver, I won't be doing much drinking, but I'll certainly watch you guys. Well, anyway, that would
the
be fun for you. I mean, obviously, we've discovered it's just an area that's just like a home away from. We just love it, and we're
yeah,
Northwoods, Wisconsin people but my history, and this is pretty special area.
yeah.
So you'll have a
the
great time.
the reason I had brought up kind of how things are now, as we talk about all the craziness that's happened in your career through, or I guess the crazy times during your career. Me at 26, what's going on in the world today is kind of my first experience with it, right? Because I was too
Yeah.
young, 08, 09, I was 12 years old, 13 years old. So my parents were dealing with that, but
Mhm.
I wasn't necessarily, affected by it or could
Yeah,
really
yeah.
grasp
You
it.
didn't, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Didn't hit you
yeah.
directly.
So this is my first experience. Now,
Mhm.
I will wrap up that conversation though. 'Cause it was more just saying like it's fun for me as to kind of see how things are playing out. And it's interesting because I'm not concerned as much as I think. Well, our clients obviously are much more concerned, right? But
Concern's a normal thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
we separate the emotion of it, because if we're also nervous, then they're going to be much more nervous,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So we have kind of the responsibility
Right.
of being the person that says, "Hey, this is going to be okay." And you know, a lot of our work, I think people would say, "Well, oh, like you said, there's we people get paid to manage other people's money." That's a very small piece, I feel, of what is actually going on behind the scenes. 90% of the times, it feels like we're more like therapists for these
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I didn't mean to make it sound impersonal, but
No,
and it's not so much what I do for people because I love what I do, and I want that responsibility, and I think there's a lot of things that move short version. The markets are the participants in the markets are bigger than me. I mean, we're part of it, but there's some
yeah,
very large pools of monies being managed by professionals that we pale in comparison on an individual basis
hmm,
compared to the real money that does move the market on a given day was my point. And we're all part of that, and we all have a
yeah,
long-term view of how do we participate in that. But on a day-to-day basis, we wouldn't
you're right.
we wouldn't move the dial
Now,
on an individual basis.
if we were, if you want to put yourself in my shoes, or maybe I'm more putting myself in your shoes, when let's say you were 26-year-old Andy,
Yeah,
or I was 26-year-old Andy,
yeah.
um, and you've been a mentor to me, who would you say was probably the most maybe influential person for you? Or do you have someone that you said, this was my mentor, this person that,
My mentor was Gary Personette, who I don't know if you'll ever see this. It's but he's a mentor to many people, and it's a passion of his. He's retired, but he continues to do it along with other philanthropic work. He's got a passion, and it's just something that's just built into him. He gets
mhm,
out of bed every day to make a difference, and I think he's had that his whole career. And certainly he was my mentor. Yeah, when I was in my 20s, I even came out of college saying, I don't know what I want to do, but this is the type of role I picture myself in. And I don't want to be some cold caller I want to work within an existing business and
mhm.
do, be in my, let me work hard and help people figure things out, but don't make me go out there hunting and gathering.
That was the
Um,
Gary that I met. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, and
Hmm.
and he's the one that called me a young punk in '98, saying, you're 28 years old. The by and large, the people out there that meet you, they might think you're a wonderful guy, and you have great intentions, and you care and you're trustworthy, but you don't know what we know. You haven't been through so many different environments, and you haven't been through our life. The number one thing is, Gary always said, you have to respect the people that you are now working with or being paid to work for. You got to respect who they are, what their journey was, what their story was. If you don't go into the meeting respecting them for what they've been through, and it's all about you, you don't belong in this business.
Mm.
It's not about you. It's about those people that are coming to you saying, I need your advice. How am I doing? Where am I going? How do I plan for things?
Mm.
And he was my mentor. He's the one that said, you've got to help people figure out what their game plan is specific to them, what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, and you got to respect who they are as people, so that they feel that you respect them. That's where trust is not an entitlement; it's earned,
Mm.
and you earn that by respecting those in front of you to say, "What's your story?" And that's what a mentor does, is they really give you that dose of, this is, at the end of the day, this is really how this is why relationships are so important, is you really have to develop, and you got to work your ass off for those relationships that they do trust you to take care of them. You never want to take that for granted. You always want
Mm.
to work for that. So he taught me that. That's what a mentor does. He's like,
Mhm.
it's a never ending job.
I guess for I want to be respectful of your time there, because obviously you're in your good graces to pull away from the family on a weekend getaway to talk with me and
That's
the
great. I've
viewers.
enjoyed it. It's great.
Um, is there? I think there's a lot of people listening and watching out there that are like me, or and even I mean, it's still to this day. I mean, not sometimes I feel that while a lot has changed from the first time that I met Andy, and he's kind of guided me to where I am now. I'm still kind of that person that's like, you know, what's next? Where do I go from here? How do I go from there? I
Mhm.
guess for the people listening that are looking for their next step or looking for that person that can help guide them,
Mhm.
how would you how would you tell them to find a mentor, to find someone that is willing to work with them?
How do you find a mentor just in life in general?
Yeah.
So, not everyone that just is fortunate to run into one that likes doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I got lucky.
yeah, well, and I think, there's 6 degrees of separation between all of us. We all are connected in a
Yeah.
way. And I think part of it is raising your hand. You ask your closest friends, or you ask your most trusted people around you, you know, I'd really like to have someone that can kind of help me sort some things out. And it might be professional help. It might be, someone that just does it out of their living room or home office, that just likes to sit with people. It could be at a church. It could be, it could be at an organization. It could be, it doesn't, it's not one answer. It's the fact that you start with the people that are immediately around you that have been mentored, and you say, well, how did it work for you? And it doesn't mean they're going to pick up the phone and call Andy, but the point is, it was just raising your hand saying, I'd love to talk with him sometime. I'd love to talk with her sometime. And wherever your local community or group of people is, whatever your circle of friends is, you start with those people around you. Have you guys ever you ask questions? Have you ever had a mentor? Has anyone mentored you? And I don't know if that's an easy answer, but it's not an easy answer to come
It's
up
not an
with, because
easy
that's
question,
different.
right?
Not
That's
an
the
easy
thing.
question, not an easy answer. But if you stay quiet, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. If you're not willing to take initiative, then you're never going to have a mentor.
There
So
you go.
you got to
Simple as
raise your
that.
hand and ask, right?
Simple as that.
You got to ask
Perfect.
around, talk to people you trust, and say, where do I start here?
Yeah.
And that to me is where you go. And it could be professional, it could be some local group, and again, it could be get involved in the community. You'd be amazed how many people in the community that, because they have that passion to do stuff for other people, sometimes that's where your mentors are lying, is they just love giving back. And every community has some level of community service organizations and stuff, and you might join it for one reason, and at the end of the day you find out that those are the people that'll give you the biggest bear hug once they get to know you, and
Yeah.
and once they really trust the fact that you really do believe in humanity and giving back and doing things for other people, you suddenly indirectly start getting exposed to people that could become a mentor, could become a role model. So
Okay.
I think you have to take the first step. Life's a marathon. You never finish the marathon if you don't keep moving forward. You got to keep moving forward. You don't just stop at the aid station drinking water. You'll never finish the marathon. You've got to keep moving. You got to start moving again.
Yeah.
So every one of us has to treat it that way. So that's where you're going to uncover who your mentor could be. And you might fail at first, but you never stop trying. You
Yeah.
always raise your hand and find out, where do I go with this?
All right. Well, we will wrap up there now. And again, I just want to thank everyone listening, watching, and thank Andy, of course. If, besides my parents, Andy is probably one of the most influential people in my
I
life
appreciate
to
it.
this point, to where I got to where I am now. And I think to everyone listening, as always, if you feel like you're kind of stuck in life or lost, a few key takeaways from this conversation is you have to trust the process. Patience doesn't mean 1 month, 6 months, 1 year. It could be a decade of saying, hey, like, is this right for me? Is there an aha moment? And I
Mhm,
feel like a lot of times nowadays we get wrapped up in the instant gratification.
mhm,
But the lesson at the end of the day is raise your hand, be a student, and then again, at the end of the day, things feel like this is different, this is a tough time, but it's the same. You just have to believe that things will work out at the end of the
Be
day.
willing to be coached. Be willing to
Yeah.
be coached.
And as always, if you know anyone else also feeling that same way, you're more than welcome to share the show with them. Comment below other topics you want us to talk about. But as always, if you feel like you need a friend, you can come meet mine, and we'll see you all next Saturday. Thanks
Hey,
again.
David, I'll just close with this.
Sure.
I think all the viewing audience and certainly those around you, David's a special guy, and it's special because he's got a great soul, and that's not always true with a lot of people we meet in our life. And David, you're still in the middle, early innings of your journey, and I love what you're doing here, and I love the fact that you're always taking a step forward. And as soon as you stop doing that, that's on you, no one else. And I think your whole community around you is appreciating your work and your passion and just you as a person. So I was happy to do this because of who you are, man. You're a great person. So and certainly a great friend. So
Thank you, Andy. And
you
yeah,
got it.
maybe I'm walking forward, but I'm tripping sometimes, but that's why we're here. Yeah.